Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Run, Walk, Talk, Tales of Inclusion and Development. I'm Steph Devo. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm here with Judy Borovich, and her pronouns are she and her. And today we're going to talk about the fun topic of resiliency and being resilient and what that means. And so, Judy, I'm going to hand it over to you. Tell me,
Yeah.
how do you define it?
Well, when I think about the various authors who write on resilience and the different, researchers who've written on
Mhm.
resilience, to me, what resonates is it's about one's ability to really adapt and keep going, in the face of
Mhm.
adversity, in the face of
Mhm.
challenges, in the face of, significant stress.
Yeah.
And I think, if I'm thinking about resiliency, it really requires this emotional strength, mental strength, and an ability to really keep a positive outlook during tough times. And, when I was thinking about that, when I was thinking about this ability to keep a positive outlook, I also started thinking about, right now there's a lot of talk about toxic positivity.
Yes.
And I would add that having that positive outlook is different than what we mean by toxic positivity. I think with toxic
Mhm.
positivity, we're really denying what is happening, right? We're denying our emotions. We're just kind of saying everything is rainbow and unicorns and sunshine. Whereas with resiliency, you really need to go through and feel your emotions. You need to go through discomfort. You need to potentially go through pain to develop resilience. That's really how you develop it. So you want to keep that positive outlook, but it doesn't mean you deny what's actually going on. And then the other piece of
Mhm.
it that I think is
Mhm.
important when I think about resilience is we're also not saying that it excuses systemic systems or issues that need to be
That's right.
changed. We're
That's
not
right.
saying just be resilient and get on with it. We
Yeah.
still need to look at those systems, but we're also saying that within ourselves as individuals, we can build resilience. And so, what about for you,
Mhm.
Steph? What is your definition?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's sort of the simple definition of being able to kind of come back stronger than
Hmm.
before, from dealing with sort of challenges. I think of all of the things that have gone on over the last few years with the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, and all of these societal things that were coming at us and we didn't know, right? You think of the early days of COVID and how scary it was for different people and around the world, right? We could all say that we were dealing with this common pandemic, but the way governments and whatnot did things differently. And I really sort of think about how resilient people had to be through that. And I also, of course, when I think of resiliency, I think of the book Grit, Angela Duckworth right here,
Hmm.
and how she talks about, with being successful or how to be successful, bringing in, grit and talking about that, she talks about the power of passion and perseverance is sort of making up the definition of grit. Um, it's been 7 years since she wrote that book, and it
Wow.
still feels like I refer to it a lot
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
because there's just something about the way she talks about it as this ability to get through and keep going, right?
Absolutely. And I love that you bring up the element of the success. Resilience is a factor or a contributing
Mm-hmm.
factor in success, because it's that keeping going even when things are looking tough. And
Yes.
so, she really frames it as successful people most times need to have that resiliency, that ability to keep going, because not everything's going to go our way all of the time, and certainly changes happen. And how do we adapt to those changes? We need
Yeah.
resiliency for that.
Yeah. So, which also it kind of reminds me, and I think of, you know, do you see resiliency or being resilient as a quality that someone can learn and develop, or is this a character trait, and what do you think you can do toward, like, what are some of those actionable steps? Because Judy, we're always about action.
Well, no, absolutely. And you know me, I mean, from a learning and development perspective, do I think resiliency is a skill or a trait that can be developed? Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
But I mean, the research also indicates there are genetic factors at play, right? So
Mm.
we've got genetic
Mm-hmm.
factors that influence personality traits that are linked to resilience. Thinking of things like, regulating emotions. And
Yeah.
then I also think our environment influences this, right? So when we're growing up, did we see resilience model? But having said that, yeah, can we develop
Mm.
it? Can we develop skills where we are better at problem solving, where we are better at regulating our emotions?
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think it can be, resiliency can be cultivated and strengthened over time. And I think that, when you say what are actionable steps, I think it's different for different people.
Mm.
Um, I think that, taking time to be in the moment, taking time to be present, maybe, through things like meditation. I know for me,
Mm.
meditation increases self awareness. And I think it's through self awareness that we can, um, uh, you know, improve our resiliency. I also think, things like getting exercise, getting rest, um, can help build our resiliency or our capacity, we'll say, for resiliency. And I think, like
Mm-hmm.
any skill, it requires practice. So you need to
Yes.
continually be reflecting on what you've done and thinking about ways that and situations in which maybe you weren't as resilient as you wanted to be, and think about maybe why that was. And I think the other thing, with respect to can you learn it, I've also been thinking about organizational resiliency. So within our
Mm.
organizations, how do we make
Mm-hmm.
our organizations overall more resilient? I think by having a learning culture, promoting a
Yeah.
growth mindset,
Yes.
promoting transparency. We've spoken on this podcast before about psychological safety. So I think
Yes.
if we want our organizations to be more resilient, those are some of the key items that we need to, or some of the key skills and traits that we need to be driving within organizations as well. I'm curious though, Steph, for you, do you see resiliency, or do you think resiliency is seen differently for different generations?
Yeah. This is something that I think about in my work because I think the stats show that we have 5 generations working together. And, you know, one study, there was a study by Deloitte in 2020, the Deloitte Global Millennial Survey, um, that kind of found that through the pandemic, that it's kind of 3/4 of the people, or like the millennials in the pandemic, said they became more sympathetic to others and wanting to create a more positive impact on the world and really take this sort of challenge on, which thank goodness is really good to see, sort of for the millennials and the Gen Zs, about wanting to kind of take charge. I think the Gen Xers, we grew up in a generation where technology, we were starting to learn a bit about technology, right? And I would say also society, things were changing, going from maybe, the traditional sort of scene as the dad works, the mom stays home, to a dual income,
Mhm,
family, where the Gen Xers needed to um, come home by themselves with their key, let themselves in, eat their Ritz
mhm,
crackers and Cheese Whiz,
mhm, mhm.
and just deal with things, right? Without the cell phones and the technology.
And even seeing the single parent household rise, like
That's
not
right.
and not having the sort of traditional models any longer, as you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and I see, you know, some of the stats were showing that the Gen Zs, being that digital native, they've always
Mhm,
had technology to
mhm,
use as a tool for support and learning and understanding. you know um let's be honest, meditation for myself when I was, like, I don't know, in high school, was that a thing? Maybe, but not really.
mhm, mhm.
you
It wasn't
know
part of the conversation, everyday
no.
conversation,
Would your
the way it.
parents have
Yeah.
said, "Oh, Steph, go meditate"?
Yeah,
Not at
yeah, yeah,
all,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely think, um all of these things based on sort of the way that, you're being raised,
Hmm.
society,
Hmm.
technology
The
comes
world
into play.
events. Yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
around resiliency.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting. And I mean, so thinking about the various sort of world events and
Hmm.
how um, we have more knowledge and there's more discussion around the rise of mental health awareness.
Mm.
How should we approach this narrative of resilience without kind of undermining, as you've sort of said, the experiences of those who struggle to kind of just bounce back? Right?
Mhm.
What do you?
Mhm.
How
Mhm.
do we
So
approach this?
yeah, thinking of that narrative of, just
Hmm.
sort of glamorizing in a way people where they just seem to come through things that are very difficult, and they've, like, hooray, look at they
Oh,
did it. If
that's
they did it,
it.
you can do it
Yeah.
too.
Yes. Write a
Yeah.
book about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost. Yeah.
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 Well, I mean, I think with that, everybody's experience is different.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so and we can't oversimplify that, if you're just
Yeah.
resilient, you can bounce back. You may need everybody's going to require different tools, and everybody's story is going to be different. And I think that certainly with mental health awareness, one of the beautiful things about it is there's an awareness of mental health professionals that you can work with,
Yeah.
because I don't think that that can be discounted. So I think that if I'm thinking about people being resilient, to me it's different than, I mean, it's lovely to hear people's stories where they rose above adversity and hear about how they got through it, but I don't think that somebody should be feeling that just because somebody else got through something seemingly easier than they're finding it,
Yeah.
that means that there's something wrong with them. So I think that that's where,
Mhm.
certainly around issues of mental health, reaching out to professionals, reaching out to people that you have relationship with, to let them know that you're struggling. So all that to say, I think resiliency is different for different people. And I think,
Yeah.
that leads me to a question for you. Um, and it's really building on this. You know, what, how would you describe that sort of myth of resilient people needing to go through it alone? Like, I think we have this idea that,
Mhm.
the
Yes.
hero, the individual kind of goes
That's
through
right.
triumphs over things and suddenly they come out at the other end. But there's really more to it than that, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah. We I think sometimes we love the hero story,
Hmm.
right? That
Hmm.
but the reality is I think um you need a community, and I think that's the other
Hmm.
thing, with the discussion of mental health awareness and when you're dealing with mental health challenges is finding that community or when you're struggling, right? I
Hmm.
feel like and community looks different for different people, right? And it could be family or
Yeah.
it might not be family. Your family may be sort of that source of struggle and angst, and you need to
Hmm.
find it through friends, through work colleagues, through professionals. Um, and I really think being able to find a community that sort of helps and supports you to work through things
Hmm.
is absolutely key. And I think that's why you hear those stories of people who might be able to bounce back quicker than others is
Hmm.
because they had the support and the community
Hmm.
where and so, yeah, I don't think, it might seem as they're the hero going through it alone, but in reality, it's like one of those things where success doesn't happen just with that one person. There's a
Hmm.
huge team behind them,
Well,
supporting,
and
right?
and again, everybody's different. So
That's
some
right.
individuals have a higher tolerance for certain events than
Yeah.
other people, and so I think there's a whole variety of factors in play, for sure. So
Yeah.
we typically go now to what's an actionable step, or what's sort of a light bulb moment that we had. What came up for you today in our conversation?
For me, I think I want to talk about resiliency more in my
Mm-hmm.
company. So
Mhm.
I think I'm gonna, when I'm having sort of one-on-one conversations, because I really want to kind of dig deeper into how people are feeling about the term,
Mhm.
what they're thinking about. So
Mhm.
maybe who knows, in a future podcast, I might share a little bit of
Oh,
what
that
I
sounds
see in our
great.
organization. Yeah.
Yeah,
What
no, I
about
love
you?
that. Um, well, I love this idea that you have of going and speaking to people and
Hmm.
hearing their stories and having them reflect on, what resiliency means to them. Um, I'm thinking a lot after our conversation about empathy and the role that it plays
Mm,
in resiliency. So that's something that is on my mind because I think to truly be resilient, there has to be a level of empathy that we have
yeah.
for other people,
Yeah.
and a level of self-awareness as we head on that journey to be more resilient in a particular situation. But I love your idea of speaking to people and really gathering and getting stories from others, and
Hmm.
hearing about people's challenges and definitions and thoughts on resiliency. All
You want
right.
to close
Well,
us
I think
out?
I think that's a
Yeah.
wrap. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again next time.